They ignored my grandma on her deathbed, then showed up for the money. My grandma wasn't just a member of her church, she was the church. Big White Church, as we'll call it, sat right in the heart of a shiny, well-to-do suburb deep in the Bible Belt. Picture tall white columns, rows of polished pews, and a parking lot full of minivans on Sunday mornings. It was one of those big, influential Bible-believing churches, part of a well-known evangelical denomination where tradition reigned supreme. And my grandma, she was the heart and soul of it. For decades, she poured herself into that church like it was her full-time job. She was in that nursery every Sunday morning, rocking babies, wiping noses, comforting toddlers like it was second nature. She practically lived in that church kitchen, had flipping pancakes and scrambling eggs for hundreds of fellowship breakfasts and church dinners. She wasn't just involved, she showed up in every way that counted. She went on retreats, joined choir tours with her kids and grandkids, and led youth Bible study every Sunday night like clockwork. Missions? She was all in. Home missions, special offerings, summer youth programs, you name it. Grandma didn't just tithe, she gave above and beyond, always slipping something extra into the collection plate when no one was looking. But what made her truly unforgettable wasn't just how much she did, it was how she made people feel. Grandma had a rare gift. She made you feel like you were the most important person in the room, like what you said mattered, like you mattered. And she didn't do it for praise or attention. It was just who she was. I got to witness it firsthand more times than I can count. Even though I went to a different church, I spent a lot of weekends visiting her, which meant tagging along to Big White Church events. And every single time I saw her do something that left me in awe. There's one moment I'll never forget. One morning, she got up before the sun and cooked a full breakfast for a big group of Big White Church youth. Dozens of them, just her. 2 full hours in that massive church kitchen, flipping sausage, whisking eggs, making it all perfect. And when the kids finally sat down to eat, instead of taking any credit, she smiled, pointed to the high school student who had helped plan it all, and said, "Let's give a round of applause to this young man for organizing such a wonderful prayer breakfast." And they did. Everyone clapped, and the boy turned beet red with pride. Grandma just stood there quietly, beaming, letting him have the spotlight. That was her magic. She knew how to shine by making others shine. I'll never forget that youth retreat at church camp, tucked away in some quiet pocket of the countryside. I was just a kid, but the memory's crystal clear. That night, one of Big White Church's assistant pastors, let's just call him Ass Pastor, realized he had forgotten a big box of evangelism materials back in the city. Now, these weren't optional. They were needed first thing in the morning for the youth program. Instead of owning up to the mistake, Ass Pastor called up my grandma. And what did she do? She drove all night, miles back to the city, picked up the materials, and made it back in time before anyone even noticed they were missing. The senior pastor, who we'll call Pompous Pastor, never found out that Ass Pastor had screwed up. And even worse, Ass Pastor never thanked her. Nothing, not even a passing "God bless you." As a kid, I was furious. I asked her why she didn't seem upset. She smiled and said, "Because those materials might help children find Jesus. That's my reward." That's who my grandma was. But her service to Big White Church came to a sudden, brutal halt when she was 73. A car accident broke her back, and just like that, her physically active church life was over. She spent the next 10 years bound to her home. Her mind remained razor sharp, her faith unshaken, but her body slowly deteriorated. During those 10 years, she never stopped trying to stay connected. She called, she wrote, she invited church folks and leaders to come visit. Not one person came. Not once. When hospice came and the end was near, she and my grandpa decided to do what good church folks do, plan her funeral with the church she gave her life to. They called Big White Church. Specifically, they asked for Pompous Pastor, the man she had known for over 3 decades. She just wanted to talk, to share her wishes. He said he was too busy. Instead, he sent Ass Pastor, the same one who never thanked her a decade earlier. What happened next still makes my blood boil. Ass Pastor sat with my grandma, frail, bedridden, fighting through pain, and spent a few minutes discussing her funeral plans. Then, with hardly any warning, he started shifting the conversation toward her will. He leaned in and said she should lay up her treasure in heaven by remembering the church financially, that she should leave something to Big White Church to bless others. Grandpa shut that talk down quickly. This is neither the time nor place. Ass Pastor nodded, shifted back to funeral logistics for a minute or two, and then went right back to the money. Quoting scripture, guilt-tripping, pushing the idea of storing treasure in heaven by writing a check to the church. Grandpa kept stepping in, saying it was inappropriate, that she was in agony, but Ass Pastor wouldn't let it go. That was the moment my grandma, the strongest woman I've ever known, broke. She sobbed, loudly, uncontrollably. This woman didn't cry when she was told she'd never walk again. She didn't cry during months of painful rehab. She only ever cried for others, never herself. She was steel wrapped in love, Kevlar soaked in grace. But that day, she broke down. And Grandpa? The retired steelworker, the Marine sergeant, the Korean War vet. He got up, grabbed Ass Pastor by the arm, and escorted him out of the house. Just say, it wasn't gentle. Grandma surprised us all by living another 6 months through sheer force of will. When she finally passed, her memorial was held not at Big White Church, but a local funeral home. Pompous Pastor and Ass Pastor were no-shows. Not even a fake apology, not even sitting in the crowd. At the service, Grandpa stepped up to the podium and faced the crowd. Some of you may have heard that I disinvited Pompous Pastor and Ass Pastor, he began. This isn't the place for me to explain why, but if you know me, you know my reasons are good. Also, my wife asked me to exclude them. Then he did something beautiful. He made it an open mic. Anyone who wanted to could come up and share stories, memories, anything that honored her life. And they did. Nearly a third of the 100 people there stepped up to speak. The service that was meant to last 30 minutes went over 2 hours. And not one person left early. There were laughs, there were tears, there were songs played by her grandchildren and hymns sung by hand-linked family and friends. Afterwards, people kept telling my grandpa how uplifting and real the funeral was. Some even said, funerals are better without preachers anyway. And then came the will. A few weeks later, it was time to read Grandma's will. Now, in our family, the reading of the will was more than just a formality. It was a tradition. We didn't do formal family reunions, but we always came together for milestones. And these readings often included personal keepsakes and small gestures that carried deep emotional weight. This time, though, there was a rumor that Grandma's will had some surprises. So the family gathered in a law office conference room, which quickly filled with my mom, aunts, uncles, cousins, great-aunts, and uncles, and more. It was packed wall to wall. And then Pompous Pastor and Ass Pastor walked in. Apparently, the lawyer had informed them that they were named in the will, both the church and them personally. You could practically see the dollar signs in their eyes. I swear my cousins and I caught them salivating. The lawyer asked them to sit up front near him, facing everyone. What they didn't realize was that now the entire room had a front row view of them. And even better, there were nearly 24 people between them and the only door out. They weren't going anywhere. And what happened next? Well, let's just say Grandma wasn't done yet. The bequests in Grandma's will were generous, nothing too over the top, but definitely kind. Pretty much what we expected. Grandpa, of course, kept the house, the contents, the retirement accounts, and anything left after all the gifts were distributed. Kids, grandkids, and a few local charities each got thoughtful, well-sized sums of money. And scattered throughout were sentimental gifts, items with little monetary value, but deep emotional significance. What really stood out, though, was how Grandma arranged the will. After Grandpa, the beneficiaries were listed in a slow build crescendo. First, the smallest items with emotional weight, then a few $1,000s for each grandchild, then larger amounts for each of her children, nieces, nephews, and siblings. After that, some substantial donations were allocated to local nonprofits. The giving kept growing, like an orchestra building to its final note. And that's exactly when Pompous Pastor and Ass Pastor perked up. They sat through the entire reading, nodding politely, quietly smirking, clearly trying to mask their excitement as they caught on to the pattern. They saw the way the dollar amounts climbed, and they knew they were almost last on the list. The suspense was killing them. Their expressions said it all. We're about to hit the jackpot. Then, Grandma's lawyer paused. He adjusted his glasses, pulled out a handwritten letter, and said, "Before I read the bequest to Big White Church, Pompous Pastor, and Ass Pastor, Miss Graham requested that I share this written statement with everyone here." He unfolded the letter and began to read. For the past 10 years, not one person from Big White Church ever called me, visited me, or sent a single note to let me know I was remembered. Not one minister, not one deacon, not a single woman from the church, not one of the people I had cooked for, prayed with, laughed with, and considered family. I worked tirelessly for you. I showed up for decades. I gave my time, my energy, my love. But when I needed you, you acted like I didn't exist. The room fell still. You could feel the shift in energy, like someone had sucked the air out of it. I did have one visitor when I was dying. I invited Pompous Pastor to help plan my funeral. He didn't come. He couldn't find the time. Instead, he sent Ass Pastor. And then her words twisted the knife. Ass Pastor didn't come to talk about my funeral. He came to talk about my money, about how I could lay up my treasure in heaven by remembering Big White Church in my will. That's when I realized I had let my church break my heart one final time. But I decided that would be the last time. You could hear a pin drop. The letter continued. What Ass Pastor didn't know was that Grandpa and I had already drawn up the will by then. At the time, it included a double tithe, 20% of my entire estate, for what I still believed was my church, Big White Church. The lawyer looked up briefly. I'll never forget the wave of gasps that rippled around the room when he named the actual amount. It was staggering. The kind of number that makes your jaw slack and your brain skip a beat. And then Grandma's final mic drop. But the more I thought about it, the more I felt bad for not personally remembering the lovely pompous pastor and ass pastor. So I changed the will. I changed the amount for Big White Church to match the love they showed me in the last 10 years, when I was lonely, in pain, and no longer useful to them, and I left something special for the pastors too. The lawyer folded the letter with precision. Then, stone-faced, he read, "Bequest to ass pastor, 1 cent. Bequest to pompous pastor, 1 cent. Bequest to Big White Church, 1 cent." If you've ever seen two grown men look like their souls had been vacuumed out of their bodies, you can imagine the expressions on their faces. It was like someone had poured concrete down their throats. All of us in Grandma's family wanted so badly to laugh. You could feel it bubbling up inside the room like a volcano, but we didn't. We stayed quiet because we knew Grandma. This was just the setup. The 1-2 punch was coming. The lawyer cleared his throat. "There is one final bequest," he said, "to a charity called," and then he named it. "Let's call it Black Charity." Immediately, pompous pastor and ass pastor turned pale. Their smugness evaporated. They looked like they'd just been slapped across the face with a frozen fish. To everyone else, Black Charity was just another unfamiliar name. But to those two, it was personal. Black Charity was run by a prominent black church just a few miles away from Big White Church. Years ago, Big White Church had briefly partnered with them, offering modest support for their food bank, foster care programs, senior meal delivery, and other community outreach. Then came a nasty, bitter falling out. Officially, it was over doctrinal differences. Big White Church accused Black Charity of promoting the social gospel instead of the true gospel. They even sued to get their money back. But everyone who lived in the Deep South knew what was really going on. The truth was buried in racism, the kind that's polite on the surface but poisonous underneath. Grandma and Grandpa almost left Big White Church right then and there, but they stayed, hoping to plant seeds of tolerance. She used to tell us, "My church is my mission field." At the time, we didn't grasp the full weight of that statement. Only after she died did we learn that she and Grandpa had quietly sent part of their monthly tithe to Black Charity for years. The room was silent as the lawyer paused. Pompous pastor and ass pastor sat frozen. You could feel them wishing they could disappear. "The amount of this final bequest," the lawyer began, pausing for maximum effect, "is the exact same amount Grandma originally intended for Big White Church." Boom. That same massive amount, the sum that made jaws drop earlier, that was now going not to the white church that ignored her suffering, but to the Black Charity that had been discarded and disrespected by the very same institution. And if you were raised in the Deep South like they were, you knew exactly what Grandma had done. She had publicly, posthumously, and with surgical precision told those men in their church, "These people you judged, they're better than you. They're more worthy, and they will do more good with this money than you ever would have." It was a direct challenge to their racism, their pride, and their religious arrogance. She didn't just shut the door on them, she burned the whole damn porch. The lawyer gave the room a moment to absorb it all, then continued with the proceedings. But by then, we were all thinking the same thing. Grandma wasn't just strong, she was legendary.